Tonight, some prominent Democratic leaders are sharing praise for President Trump and his team following the release of the remaining living hostages held by Hamas. As his complex ceasefire deal faces a complicated but hopeful path forward, former President Joe Biden, who was in office October 7, 2023, said this tonight: "I commend President Trump and his team for their work to get a renewed ceasefire deal over the finish line." Former President Bill Clinton posted this: "President Trump and his administration, Qatar, and other regional actors deserve great credit for keeping everyone engaged until the agreement was reached." And from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, "I commend the enormous advocacy of the tireless hostage families, President Trump and his administration, and all who helped make this moment happen." My political sources tonight: former communications director for the DNC, Karen Finney, and Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton. It's nice to share this nice evening with you. I feel like there's so much doom and gloom, and we have some, not just slivers of hope, but a giant opening of hope. Karen, I want to start with you on kind of the politics of this. There's the human side, and then there is the politics of this. And what do you make of the way that those Democrats who I talked to and others are approaching the reality right now that there is a ceasefire deal, which is a very, very good thing?
It is a good thing. And, tremendous credit does go to the Trump administration and to everyone, I think, as a number of them pointed out, who is part of this, because it's clear that the key to this deal are the Arab countries, other, Muslim countries, where they are agreeing to be part of the solution. That is going to be critical. And I'll tell you, as somebody who was there on the South Lawn when Bill Clinton, for the famous handshake and the work that he tried to do, the question, I think now, it's a wonderful day, and it was wonderful to see people reunited with their loved ones. But politically, I think the question, and we'll see how much political capital President Trump will have to utilize in the days and weeks and years ahead to keep this peace, to hold it, because it's a 20-point plan, and we're on point 1 or 2, and so there's a lot of work that has to happen. And Netanyahu has been unpredictable. Hamas is evil. So it's, you're dealing with forces that are not reliable.
I think Karen's 100% correct. And if you all recall, last year when your former boss, President Clinton, was campaigning for then Vice President Harris, he stated that he tried to broker
He got
peace.
really close.
He sure did.
And the governing authorities at the time in Palestine, they weren't interested. They were not interested in wanting to have a brokered peace deal. And so I do think this is going to take a lot of work from the president and his administration. I know the American people don't like the idea of regime change. But to your point, Karen, which I think is a very solid one, how do you prolong peace if Hamas remains the governing authority of the region? Do we somehow figure out a way to empower the Palestinian people to have a more free form of governance that can lead to prolonged peace? And if so, what does that look like, not only from the United States, but as the former President Clinton cited, other actors in the region, such as Qatar, maybe Saudi Arabia, Egypt, et cetera. So this is going to be complicated, but I absolutely applaud the president.
And Karen, I don't need to tell you that this issue roiled the Democratic Party. It's starting to do it in the Republican Party now, but we'll see what happens there. But certainly politically, it was a big challenge for President Biden and then candidate Vice President Harris. A lot of people calling for ceasefire now, and there's a ceasefire now. And I read some very prominent statements from prominent Democrats saying, we're so glad this is happening. But there's also a very loud sound of silence from some of the people who were demanding a ceasefire.
Yeah, I don't know quite what to make of that, to be honest with you, but I hope that they will find their voice and praise this moment, because there is a ceasefire. And again, anybody who was part of that ceasefire now movement has to be part of keeping the peace. We all have to be on board with a role in saying what can we do to hold the peace, right? We were talking about the political implications for Donald Trump. What's it going to cost the United States? At a minimum, if you were part of that movement, you should be saying, I will be part of the solution to help peace stay in the region.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, I've been a very strong advocate for Jewish people and Israel. I consider myself to be a Zionist in many ways, in part because of my personal Christian faith. But to Karen's point, are there moments to be critical of people who are on the opposite side? Absolutely, and we're going to continue to have those conversations. But I do think that you did see a pretty large groundswell on the political left in our country of people saying, look, we want peace, we want the ceasefire. Well, it's here now. So now I think it's incumbent upon Democratic leaders to transform that movement, to try to figure out a way to have conversations, to maintain, again, peace, which is so necessary here, Dana.
So speaking of leaders, I'm just going to shift the topic slightly. President Obama was on a podcast, Mark Moran, and he had a lot to say, he, the former president. Let's just start with some of the things he said about the Democratic Party.
Sure.
You can't just be a scold all the time. You can't constantly lecture people without acknowledging that you've got some blind spots too. And I think this was a fault of some progressive language, was almost asserting a holier-than-thou superiority that's not that different from what we used to joke about coming from, the right and the moral majority, and
right,
our way, and a certain fundamentalism about how to think about stuff that I think was dangerous.
Okay. Look, Democrats have been accused of talking down to people. I think part of the problem, though, is we stop talking to people after an election. We tend to, there's a lot of communication during an election year, and then it kind of dips down. And people don't hear from us. That's part of why, in so many communities, particularly the Black communities, we say, don't just show up 6 weeks before an election. And so to my mind, that's the bigger problem. I'll let former President Obama and his team sort out the talking down to people of it all. I think as a party, as the person who was the architect of 2006 wins, we got to talk to people all the time.
He didn't just, that was like maybe the one thing he said about Democrats. Most of what he said, Shermichael, was about your party and the president, really saying you can't just be scared if you don't agree or let him meaning President Trump, from the perspective of Obama, trample on rights, et cetera. You got to be out there and really encourage people not to stay silent.
Sure, look, I intellectually understand why there's resonance with that message on the ideological left. However, I would argue that the slew of victories from Trump would suggest that that messaging isn't resonating with the American people, broadly speaking. And I think in part is because of something that the former president just stated about the plight of Democrats and their inability to articulate things that matter at a human-based level to everyday people. And until they figure that out, that the fascism, authoritarianism that may work in intellectual circles, it's not moving the needle with voters, though, I would argue.
We're out of time. Is this prediction on the shutdown and when it's going to end? I'm a little bit surprised that we're still here. And the fact that we're here means it could be
I think it's when the president chooses to bring people to the table to cut a deal, as he in 2013 accused Barack Obama of needing to do. He should listen to his own words.
I would disagree here with my friend Karen, but I would say Republicans are open to negotiating. Let's just open up the government first.
All right. Thank you both. Nice to see you.
Fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.